The morning sun pushed through the glass windows of Riverside Bistro, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors. It was just past 8 in the morning, and already the restaurant hummed with the familiar chaos of breakfast service. Plates clattered in the kitchen, the espresso machine hissed and sputtered, and conversations blended into a steady background murmur that filled every corner of the dining room. Sarah Mitchell moved through the crowded space with practiced efficiency, her white apron slightly stained from the morning shift, her dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail that had begun to loosen hours ago. She carried a tray balanced on one hand, weaving between tables with the kind of grace that came from doing the same movements 1,000 times before. Her face wore a smile, but it was the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes. It was a tool, like the pen tucked behind her ear or the notepad in her pocket, something she used to get through the day. She had been working at Riverside Bistro for nearly 3 years, ever since she dropped out of college when her mother got sick. The medical bills had piled up faster than she could count, and someone had to keep the lights on at home. Her younger brother was still in high school, and her father had left when she was 12. So Sarah became the one who carried everything. She worked double shifts when she could, picked up extra hours during holidays, and swallowed her pride every time a customer treated her like she was invisible. The restaurant itself was beautiful, the kind of place that attracted well-dressed business people and families celebrating special occasions. The walls were painted a soft cream color, decorated with black and white photographs of the riverside that gave the place its name. Crystal light fixtures hung from the ceiling, and fresh flowers sat on every table. It was elegant without being pretentious, comfortable without being casual. The owner, an older gentleman named Robert Ashford, had built the place from nothing 30 years ago, and it had become a local landmark. But Sarah had never met him. In her 3 years of working there, Robert Ashford had been nothing more than a name mentioned occasionally by the manager. He was old, people said, and mostly retired. He had handed over the daily operations to his nephew, Marcus, who ran things with an iron fist and very little warmth. Marcus cared about numbers and efficiency, not about the people who made those numbers possible. Sarah had woken up that morning with a headache that pulsed behind her eyes like a drumbeat. She had stayed up late the night before, going through bills at the kitchen table, trying to figure out how to stretch her paycheck far enough to cover everything. The rent was due in 3 days, her mother needed a prescription refilled, and her brother needed money for his class trip. She had done the math 4 different ways, and no matter how she arranged the numbers, they did not add up. She would have to ask Marcus for an advance on her next paycheck, something that always made her feel small and desperate. The morning had started badly and only gotten worse. The coffee maker at home had broken, so she arrived at work without her usual caffeine. Then her first table, a group of businessmen, had been rude and demanding, snapping their fingers to get her attention and complaining about everything from the temperature of the coffee to the speed of service. They had left her a $2 tip on a $60 bill, and one of them had made a comment about her appearance that made her skin crawl. Sarah placed the breakfast plates in front of a couple at table 7, refilled their coffee without being asked, and moved on to the next table before they could even thank her. She was tired. Not just physically tired, though her feet ached and her back hurt from carrying heavy trays. She was tired in a deeper way, the kind of exhaustion that settles into your bones and makes everything feel heavier than it should be. As she returned to the counter to pick up another order, her coworker Jenny leaned in close. Jenny was younger, barely 20, with bright eyes and an optimism that Sarah sometimes envied and sometimes found irritating. Jenny whispered, "Did you hear about table 12? They left a $50 tip on a $30 bill." Sarah glanced over at the empty table, already cleared and reset for the next customer. "Good for whoever served them," she said flatly. "It was Mike," Jenny said. "Lucky bastard." Sarah shrugged. Luck was something that happened to other people. She had stopped believing in it a long time ago.
Mike was young and charming, with an easy smile that made customers like him instantly. He never seemed stressed or worried about anything.
Sarah sometimes wondered what that must be like, to move through life without carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. The morning continued in its relentless rhythm. Orders came in, food went out, dishes piled up in the kitchen, and Sarah kept moving, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant feeling, and feeling was a luxury she could not afford. She had learned to shut off that part of herself, to become a machine that served food and collected tips and went home just to do it all over again the next day. At one point, an elderly woman at table 4 asked Sarah about her day, a genuine question asked with genuine interest. Sarah gave her standard response, a bright fake smile and a quick, "I'm doing great, thank you for asking," before hurrying away. She did not have time for small talk, and besides, what would she even say? That she was drowning in debt? That she lay awake at night worrying about her family? That she felt trapped in a life she had not chosen? No, it was better to keep it simple, keep it surface level, keep moving. It was nearly 11 when the old man walked in. Sarah was at the host stand, covering for Jenny, who had gone on break. She was looking down at the reservation book, checking which tables were available, when she heard the door chime. She looked up and saw him standing just inside the entrance, his hand still on the door handle, as if he was not sure whether to stay or go. He was old, that much was immediately obvious. His face was lined with deep wrinkles, and his hair was thin and white, combed neatly back from his forehead. He wore a brown jacket that had seen better days, the elbows worn smooth and shiny from years of use. His pants were clean, but faded, and his shoes were old leather, scuffed and creased. He carried no briefcase, no phone in his hand, nothing that marked him as someone of importance. He looked like someone who had walked in off the street, maybe hoping for a cup of coffee and a quiet place to sit. Sarah looked at him, and something inside her hardened. She had seen people like him before, people who wandered in without reservations, who ordered the cheapest thing on the menu and nursed it for hours, taking up valuable table space that could have gone to customers who actually spent money. She was not in the mood to deal with it, not today. Her head still throbbed, her feet hurt, and she had already dealt with enough difficult situations this morning. She just wanted to get through her shift without any more complications. The old man approached the stand slowly, his steps careful and measured. When he reached Sarah, he gave her a small, polite smile. His eyes were a pale blue, kind and gentle, and when he spoke, his voice was soft. "Good morning," he said. "I was hoping I could get a table for one." Sarah barely looked at him. She glanced at the reservation book, even though she knew exactly which tables were available. When she looked back up, her expression was cold. "We're fully booked," she said. The old man blinked, surprised. He looked past her into the dining room, where at least 5 tables sat completely empty, their white tablecloths smooth and undisturbed. He looked back at Sarah, confusion crossing his weathered face. "But there are empty tables right there," he said gently, pointing with one gnarled finger. Sarah felt a flash of irritation. She did not like being questioned, especially not by someone who looked like they could barely afford to eat here. "Those tables are reserved," she said curtly. It was a lie, and they both knew it. The reservation book showed no bookings for those tables for at least another hour. The old man stood there for a moment, his hands clasped in front of him. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice or demand to speak to a manager. He simply nodded slowly, sadness flickering across his face like a shadow. "I understand," he said quietly. I'm sorry to have bothered you." He turned to leave, his movements slow and a little stiff, as if his joints hurt. Sarah watched him go, and for just a moment, something twisted in her chest, something that felt uncomfortably like guilt. But she pushed it down, buried it under layers of exhaustion and resentment. She had her own problems. She did not have time to worry about every person who walked through the door. Behind her, she heard someone laugh. It was quiet, barely more than a snicker, but she heard it. She turned and saw two businessmen at a nearby table, both in expensive suits, both watching the old man shuffle toward the door. One of them said something to the other, too quiet for Sarah to hear, and they both laughed again. Sarah felt her face grow hot, but not from shame. She felt vindicated, justified in her decision. If other customers were laughing too, then clearly she had made the right choice. The old man did not belong here. This was a nice establishment, and appearances mattered. At least, that was what she told herself. The door closed behind him, and Sarah returned her attention to the reservation book. Jenny came back from her break a few minutes later, bright and chatty as always, and Sarah handed over the host stand without a word. She went back to her section, back to carrying trays and refilling water glasses, and pretending to care about whether people wanted their eggs scrambled or fried. But something nagged at her. She found herself thinking about the old man more than she wanted to. The way he had looked at her with such confusion and hurt. The way he had apologized, as if he had done something wrong by simply wanting a meal. The way his shoulders had slumped as he walked away. She tried to shake it off, to focus on her work, but the image kept returning. The rest of the morning passed without incident. The lunch crowd began to trickle in around noon, and the restaurant filled up again with the usual mix of regulars and newcomers. Sarah moved through her routine mechanically, her mind elsewhere. She thought about her brother's upcoming school trip, something he had been excited about for weeks. It was a 3-day camping trip to the mountains, something the school organized every year for sophomores. Tommy had been talking about it nonstop, and Sarah knew how much it meant to him. But the trip cost $200, and she still had not figured out where that money would come from. She thought about the pile of bills on the kitchen table at home, the ones she kept meaning to sort through but never found the time. Electric bill, water bill, internet, her mother's medical bills from last month's doctor visit. Each envelope felt like a weight pressing down on her chest, making it hard to breathe. She thought about her mother, who was doing better now but still needed medication that cost more than Sarah wanted to think about. The cancer was in remission, thank God, but the treatments had drained their savings and left them with debt that felt insurmountable. Her mother tried to hide how much pain she was still in, tried to be strong for her children, but Sarah saw through it. She saw the way her mother moved carefully, the way she sometimes closed her eyes and took deep breaths when she thought no one was looking. Sarah had sacrificed so much to take care of her family. She had given up her dreams of finishing college, of becoming a teacher like she had always wanted. She had given up her social life, her friends, her chance at a normal young adult experience. She worked 60 hours a week, sometimes more, and still it was barely enough. And on days like today, when she was exhausted and hurting and struggling to see any light at the end of the tunnel, she found herself becoming bitter, angry at the unfairness of it all, angry at her father for leaving, angry at the world for being so hard. And sometimes, like this morning, that anger spilled over onto people who did not deserve it. She did not think about the old man. She had already forgotten him. It was nearly 2 in the afternoon when Marcus gathered all the staff in the main dining room. The lunch rush had died down, and only a handful of tables were still occupied. Marcus stood near the bar, his arms crossed over his chest, his expression serious. He was a tall man in his early 40s, always impeccably dressed, his dark hair slicked back with too much gel. Sarah had never liked him. He treated the staff like numbers on a spreadsheet, replaceable and disposable. Marcus cleared his throat, and the murmur of conversation among the staff died down. Sarah stood near the back, her arms folded, wondering what this was about. Unscheduled meetings were never good news. Usually they meant someone was getting fired or new policies were being implemented that would make everyone's job harder. Marcus spoke in his usual clipped tone. "I have an announcement to make," he said. "As some of you may know, my Uncle Robert has been considering his retirement for some time now. He built this restaurant from the ground up, and it has been his life's work. However, age catches up with all of us, and he has decided it is time to step back." A few people nodded. Sarah felt a flicker of curiosity, but nothing more. She had never met Robert Ashford, and his retirement did not affect her one way or another. Or so she thought. Marcus continued. "My uncle has decided to sell the restaurant. The new owner completed the purchase last week, and today he is coming to meet all of you. I expect everyone to be on their best behavior. Make a good impression. The new owner will be here any minute." A ripple of surprise moved through the staff. Sarah felt a knot form in her stomach. A new owner meant changes, and changes were rarely good for the people at the bottom. New owners usually wanted to cut costs, which meant cutting staff or cutting hours. She thought about her bills again, about her brother's school trip, about everything that depended on her keeping this job. Jenny leaned over and whispered, "I wonder what the new owner is like. Maybe they will be nicer than Marcus." Sarah said nothing. Hope was dangerous. She had learned that lesson a long time ago. Better to expect the worst and be prepared for it. They all stood there waiting, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with a knife. The front door was visible from where they stood, and every pair of eyes turned toward it, watching for whoever was about to walk through and change their lives. Mike, who was standing near Sarah, muttered under his breath, "I bet it's some corporate suit who's never worked a day of real labor in his life. Probably going to install tablets and cut our hours to save money." A few others murmured agreement. There was a general sense of anxiety and resignation in the air. Everyone had heard stories about small, independent restaurants being bought out and turned into something unrecognizable, about staff being replaced with younger workers who would accept lower wages, about the soul being sucked out of places in the name of efficiency and profit. The door opened slowly, and the old man walked in. For a moment, Sarah thought she was seeing things. It could not be the same person, but it was. The same brown jacket, the same faded pants, the same worn shoes, the same kind blue eyes and gentle smile. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him, looking around at the assembled staff with an expression of quiet warmth. Sarah's heart dropped into her stomach. The blood drained from her face. Around her, she heard whispers of confusion from the other staff members, people wondering who this old man was and why he was here. But Sarah knew. Even before Marcus stepped forward to greet him, even before anyone said a word, she knew. And the realization hit her like a physical blow. Her hands began to shake. She clasped them together tightly, trying to stop the trembling, but it was no use. Her whole body felt cold, and her vision seemed to narrow until all she could see was that old man, standing there in his worn clothes, looking around at the staff with kindness in his eyes. Marcus moved forward with a smile that looked more genuine than any Sarah had ever seen on his face. He extended his hand, and the old man shook it warmly. Marcus turned to address the staff, his voice carrying easily across the room. "Everyone, I would like you to meet Robert Ashford, the new owner of Riverside Bistro. The room fell silent. Absolute, complete silence. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears, could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, could hear someone's breath catch in surprise. She wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor and never be seen again. Her hands were trembling so badly now that she had to press them against her sides to hide it. Her nails dug into her palms. Robert Ashford looked around the room, his gaze moving from face to face, taking in each person with genuine interest and kindness. When his eyes reached Sarah, they stopped. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other across the crowded room. His expression did not change. There was no anger there, no vindictiveness or desire for revenge. There was only a quiet, profound sadness, the look of someone who had hoped for better and been disappointed. Sarah felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them back furiously, refusing to cry in front of everyone. But inside, she was crumbling. She felt exposed, naked, as if everyone could see exactly what she had done. She wanted to run, to leave, to never come back. But her feet would not move. She stood frozen, trapped by her own shame. Robert began to speak, his voice soft but clear, carrying to every corner of the room. "Thank you all for being here," he said. "I know this must be a surprise for many of you. When Marcus's uncle decided to retire, I saw an opportunity to return to something I have always loved. This restaurant has been a part of this community for 30 years, and I want to see it continue to thrive." He paused, his eyes moving around the room again. Sarah noticed that his hands trembled slightly, a sign of his age, but his voice was steady and sure. "I know that change can be frightening. You may be worried about your jobs, about whether things will be different. I want to assure you that I have no intention of making drastic changes. I believe in this place, and I believe in the people who work here. Each of you plays a vital role, from the kitchen staff to the servers to the hosts. Without you, this restaurant is just an empty building." Sarah listened, her throat tight, her chest aching. Every word felt like it was aimed directly at her, though she knew that was impossible. He was addressing everyone. But still, she felt the weight of his words, the gentle reproach hidden beneath the kindness. Robert continued, "However, I do want to make one thing clear. This restaurant has always been a place where everyone is welcome. It does not matter what you look like, how you are dressed, or how much money you have. If someone walks through that door, they deserve to be treated with respect and dignity. That is not negotiable. That is the foundation upon which this place was built, and it is the foundation upon which it will continue to stand." The message was unmistakable. Sarah felt her face burn with shame. She knew that several other staff members were glancing at her, putting the pieces together. Jenny, standing beside her, looked confused at first, then understanding dawned on her face. She looked at Sarah with wide eyes, and Sarah looked away, unable to meet her gaze. The old man who had been turned away that morning was standing in front of them now, not as a beggar or a nuisance, but as their employer, as the person who had the power to fire every single one of them. Sarah's mind raced, imagining the worst. He would call her out in front of everyone. He would humiliate her the way she had humiliated him. He would fire her on the spot, and she would deserve every bit of it. But Robert did not call her out. He did not point at her or say her name. He simply continued speaking, outlining his vision for the restaurant, talking about maintaining quality while fostering a culture of kindness and respect. He spoke about second chances and the belief that people could change if given the opportunity.
He spoke about his own experiences in the industry, about the hardships he had faced, about the people who had helped him along the way. When he finished, he asked if anyone had questions. A few people raised their hands, asking about schedules and policies, practical things that needed to be clarified. Robert answered each question patiently, his manner never rushed or dismissive. He treated each question as if it were the most important thing in the world. One of the line cooks asked about benefits, and Robert smiled. "I am glad you asked. I will be implementing a comprehensive benefits package for all full-time employees, including health insurance, paid time off, and a retirement plan. I believe that if you work hard for me, I should take care of you. It is that simple." A murmur of surprise and approval went through the staff. These were benefits that Marcus had never offered, benefits that most restaurant workers could only dream of. Sarah felt a fresh wave of shame. This man, whom she had judged and dismissed, was offering more care and consideration to his employees than anyone else ever had. Finally, Robert said, "I would like to spend the next few days meeting with each of you individually, learning about your experiences here, and hearing your ideas for how we can make this place even better. I will be setting up meetings through Marcus. Thank you all for your time, and please, get back to work. I know you have customers waiting." The staff began to disperse, conversations breaking out in hushed tones. Sarah stood frozen, unable to move. She watched as Robert spoke briefly with Marcus, then turned and walked toward the back of the restaurant, presumably to the office. Her legs felt like they were made of lead. Jenny touched her arm. "Sarah, are you okay? You look like you have seen a ghost." Sarah shook her head, unable to speak. She pulled away from Jenny and walked quickly toward the back hallway, past the restrooms and the storage closet, to the small break room where staff could sit for a few minutes between shifts. She pushed through the door and leaned against the wall, her breath coming in short gasps. She had just turned away the owner of the restaurant. She had lied to him, dismissed him, treated him like he was nothing. And worse, she had felt justified in doing it. She had felt superior, as if his worn clothes gave her the right to judge him, to decide he was not worthy of sitting in the same room as the other customers. Who was she to make that decision? Who was she to look at another human being and decide they were less than? Sarah slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, her knees pulled up to her chest. The tears came then, hot and fast, spilling down her cheeks. She cried for her own cruelty, for the casual way she had hurt someone who had done nothing to her. She cried for all the times she had made snap judgments about people based on how they looked, for all the small moments of meanness that she had convinced herself were justified because she was tired or stressed or overwhelmed. But underneath the shame, there was also fear. She was going to lose her job. There was no question about it. Why would Robert Ashford keep someone on staff who had treated him so poorly? She would be fired, and she would deserve it. And then what? How would she pay the bills? How would she take care of her mother and brother? How would Tommy go on his school trip? How would they keep the lights on? The fear gripped her like a vice, making it hard to breathe. She put her head on her knees and sobbed harder, her whole body shaking. Everything she had worked for, everything she had sacrificed, was about to come crashing down. And it was her own fault. She sat there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Finally, she forced herself to stand up, to wipe her face and take deep breaths until the tears stopped. She could not fall apart. Not here, not now. She had tables to serve, work to do. She would finish her shift, and then she would wait for the inevitable. She would wait for Marcus to call her into the office and tell her to pack her things. Sarah splashed cold water on her face in the break room sink, trying to erase the evidence of her crying. Her eyes were still red and puffy, but there was nothing she could do about that. She straightened her apron, tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and walked back out into the restaurant. The afternoon passed in a blur. Sarah served her tables with mechanical efficiency, her mind elsewhere. Every time the office door opened, her heart jumped, expecting to be called in, but the summons never came. Customers came and went, some pleasant, some demanding, but Sarah barely registered any of them. She was operating on autopilot, going through the motions while her mind spun in circles of anxiety and regret. At one point, Mike came up to her and said, "Hey, did you hear what Robert said? Full benefits for everyone. Health insurance, Sarah. Do you know how huge that is?" Sarah nodded numbly. She knew. It was enormous. It was life-changing. Health insurance meant her mother could see her doctor regularly without them having to choose between medication and groceries. It meant Sarah could go to the dentist for the first time in 2 years. It meant security, stability, things she had not felt in so long. And she was about to lose it all because of one stupid, cruel decision. The shift finally ended. Sarah clocked out with shaking hands, gathering her things from her locker. As she was about to leave, Marcus appeared in the hallway. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This was it. But Marcus simply said, "Sarah, Mr. Ashford would like to meet with you tomorrow at 10 in the morning, before your shift. Please be on time."
Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Marcus walked away, and she left the restaurant, stepping out into the cool afternoon air. The sun was lower in the sky now, casting everything in shades of gold and amber. She walked to the bus stop and sat down on the bench, her whole body heavy with dread. That night, she barely slept. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through 1,000 different scenarios in her mind. What would she say? Should she apologize? Should she try to explain? Would it matter? By the time the sun rose, she had decided that nothing she said would make a difference. She would go to the meeting, accept whatever consequences came, and try to figure out what to do next. She thought about looking for other jobs, but the prospect filled her with despair. Where else would she find something that paid as well? Where else would offer benefits? Most restaurants in the area paid minimum wage with no benefits at all. She had been lucky to have this job, even under Marcus's cold management. And now she had thrown it all away. Sarah got out of bed early and moved through her morning routine like a zombie. She showered, dressed, made coffee that she could not bring herself to drink. Her mother was still asleep, and Tommy had already left for school. She was grateful for the solitude, for not having to explain why she looked like she had not slept, why her eyes were red and swollen again from crying in the middle of the night. She arrived at the restaurant at 9:45, giving herself extra time in case the bus was late. She sat in her car in the parking lot, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles, trying to find the courage to go inside. At 9:58, she forced herself to move. She walked through the front door, which was unlocked but still closed to customers. The dining room was empty and quiet, the table set but the lights dim. Marcus was waiting near the bar. He gestured toward the back. "He is in the office," Marcus said, his tone unreadable. Sarah could not tell if there was sympathy in his eyes, or if she was imagining it. Sarah walked down the familiar hallway, her footsteps echoing on the tile floor. The office door was open. She stopped in the doorway, her hand raised to knock, and saw Robert sitting behind the desk, reading something on a laptop. He looked up when he heard her, and his face broke into a gentle smile. "Sarah, please come in. Close the door and have a seat." She did as he asked, moving like a robot, her limbs stiff and awkward. She sat in the chair across from the desk, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Robert closed the laptop and folded his hands on the desk, looking at her with those same kind blue eyes. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Sarah could not bring herself to meet his gaze. She stared at her hands, at the chipped nail polish she had not had time to fix, at the calluses on her palms from carrying heavy trays. Finally, Robert spoke. "Do you know why I asked you here, Sarah?" Her voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "Because of yesterday. Because of what I did. Tell me what you think you did." Sarah swallowed hard, forcing herself to look up at him. His expression was open, not angry or accusatory, just patient, waiting. "I turned you away," she said, her voice shaking. "You asked for a table, and I lied and said we were full. I judged you based on how you looked, and I decided you did not belong here. And I was wrong. I was so wrong, and I am so sorry." The words came out in a rush, tumbling over each other. Once she started, she could not stop. "I have no excuse. I was tired, and I was in a bad mood, but that does not make it okay. You deserved to be treated with respect, and I failed. I failed you, and I failed what this restaurant is supposed to stand for. I understand if you want to fire me. I deserve it." Her voice broke on the last words, and she felt tears sliding down her cheeks again. She was so tired of crying, but she could not seem to stop. Robert listened to all of this without interrupting. When she finally fell silent, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, he leaned back in his chair and sighed softly. "You are right," he said. "What you did was wrong. It was unkind, and it was unfair. And yes, if I wanted to, I could fire you." Sarah nodded, her heart sinking. This was it. But then Robert continued. "However, I am not going to do that." Sarah's head snapped up, surprise written across her face. "What?" Robert smiled, a sad sort of smile. "Everyone makes mistakes, Sarah. Everyone has moments when they are less than their best selves. The question is not whether you made a mistake. The question is what you do afterward. Do you learn from it? Do you become better? Or do you make excuses and continue down the same path?" He leaned forward, his elbows on the desk. "I have been in this business for a long time, and I have learned that people are complicated. We all carry burdens that others cannot see. We all have bad days. We all have moments when we let our own pain or frustration cause us to hurt others. That does not make it right, but it does make it human." Sarah stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. She had been so certain that she would be fired, so prepared for the worst, that this possibility had not even occurred to her. Robert continued. "I want to tell you a story, Sarah. Would that be all right?" She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "Many years ago, when I was young, I worked in a restaurant much like this one. I was a busboy, the lowest position you could have. I cleaned tables and washed dishes and did whatever anyone told me to do. I was poor, and my clothes were worn, and I did not look like much. One day, a customer complained about me. He said I made him uncomfortable, that I looked dirty, that he did not want me near his table. The manager came over and, without even asking me what happened, told me I was fired. Just like that. No second chance, no opportunity to explain. I was out on the street." He paused, his eyes distant, lost in the memory. "I was devastated. I needed that job desperately. I had a family to support. My mother was sick, my father had passed away the year before, and I had 2 younger sisters who depended on me. But more than that, I was humiliated. I felt like I was worthless, like I did not deserve to be treated with basic human decency. That feeling stayed with me for a long time." Robert's eyes focused on Sarah again.
But eventually, I picked myself up. I found another job and then another. I worked hard. I learned everything I could, and eventually I saved enough money to open my own place. A small diner at first, nothing fancy. But I promised myself that if I ever had my own restaurant, it would be different. It would be a place where everyone was welcome, where no one would be judged by how they looked or how much money they had, where every person, customer and employee alike, would be treated with dignity and respect. He gestured around the office, indicating the restaurant beyond. That is what Riverside Bistro was built on. That is why I bought it back. Not to make money, though I hope it will be profitable, but to create a place that embodies those values.
A place that reminds people, in a world that can be cruel and cold, that kindness still matters. Sarah felt tears sliding down her cheeks again, but she did not bother to wipe them away. She was overwhelmed by the grace being extended to her, the undeserved mercy. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you being so kind to me after what I did?" Robert reached across the desk and gently placed his hand over hers. "Because I remember what it feels like to be judged. I remember what it feels like to be dismissed as less than human. And I refuse to do that to anyone else, even someone who did it to me. Besides, I believe in second chances. I believe people can change. And I believe you want to change." He squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. "I am not firing you, Sarah, but I am asking you to do something for me. I am asking you to think about why you treated me the way you did. Not to punish yourself, but to understand. Because until you understand where that impulse came from, you cannot change it. And I believe you want to change. I believe you can be better than the person you were yesterday." His words broke something open inside her. Sarah put her head in her hands and sobbed, the kind of deep, wrenching sobs that come from a place of profound release. All the guilt and shame and fear poured out of her, but also something else, something that felt like hope, something that felt like the possibility of redemption. Robert sat quietly, letting her cry, not rushing her or making her feel self-conscious about her tears. He simply sat there, a calm presence, offering her the space to feel everything she needed to feel. When she finally lifted her head, her face blotchy and her eyes swollen, he handed her a box of tissues from the desk drawer. "Thank you," she whispered, taking a tissue and wiping her face. "Thank you for giving me a second chance. I promise I will not waste it. I will be better. I will do better." Robert smiled warmly. "I believe you will. Now, I have one more thing to ask of you. I am going to be implementing some changes around here, and I would like your help. You have worked here for 3 years. You know this place inside and out. You know the customers, you know the staff, you know what works and what does not. I want to hear your ideas. I want you to be part of making this restaurant into what it should be." Sarah could not believe what she was hearing. Not only was she not being fired, she was being asked to contribute, to be part of something bigger than herself. "I will do whatever I can," she said earnestly. "Anything you need." They talked for another 30 minutes, Robert asking her questions about her experience, about the challenges the staff faced, about what customers complained about most often. Sarah answered honestly, no longer afraid to speak her mind. She told him about the inadequate training new staff received, about how Marcus never listened to employee concerns, about customers who were regulars but who sometimes treated the staff poorly without any consequences. And as they talked, she felt something shift inside her. The walls she had built around herself,
The hard shell she had developed to survive began to crack and crumble. When the meeting finally ended, Sarah left the office feeling lighter than she had in years. She still had problems. Her mother still needed medication, her brother still needed support, the bills still waited at home. But something fundamental had changed. She had been shown grace when she deserved judgment, mercy when she expected condemnation, and that changed everything. Over the following weeks, Robert implemented his changes gradually. He raised wages for all the staff, bringing some people to tears when the new paychecks came through. He brought in a training program focused not just on efficiency, but on emotional intelligence, teaching the staff how to read customers, how to empathize, how to make people feel valued and seen. He changed the atmosphere of the place, not through new decorations or fancy equipment, but through his presence and his example. Robert was there almost every day, not locked away in an office, but out on the floor, talking to customers, helping the staff, bussing tables when things got busy. He learned everyone's name, asked about their families, remembered details about their lives. He treated the dishwasher with the same respect and attention he gave to the head chef. And slowly, the staff began to change too. Sarah threw herself into her work with renewed energy. She started noticing things she had overlooked before, like the regular customer who always sat alone and never talked to anyone. She learned his name was George, and that his wife had died 2 years ago, and that coming to the restaurant was the only social interaction he had all week.
She started sitting with him for a few minutes during slow periods, just talking, letting him share stories about his late wife Margaret. It was a small thing, but she could see how much it meant to him. His face would light up when he saw her, and sometimes he would bring old photographs to show her. She also started noticing the other customers she had dismissed or judged over the years. The young mother struggling to keep her toddler quiet while she ate, who Sarah now offered crayons and paper to without being asked. The teenagers who came in after school and ordered only fries and sodas, splitting one meal between 3 of them because that was all they could afford. Sarah now greeted them with genuine friendliness instead of barely concealed annoyance, and she made sure their portions were generous. There was an elderly couple who always came in on Sundays and always split the Sunday special because they were on a fixed income. Sarah had always thought of them as taking up space, but now she saw them differently. She learned their names were Harold and Edith, and they had been married for 53 years. She started giving them complimentary dessert, telling them it was a special promotion, just so she could see the joy on their faces. Jenny noticed the change in Sarah and commented on it one day during a break. "You seem different," Jenny said, studying her friend's face. "Happier, maybe? Or just, I don't know, more present, like you are actually here instead of just going through the motions." Jenny nodded enthusiastically. "It totally does. And honestly, Mr. Ashford is good for this place, good for all of us. I have been here almost as long as you, and this is the first time I have felt like we actually matter, like we are not just replaceable cogs in a machine." Sarah nodded. That was an understatement. Robert had not just changed the restaurant, he had changed all of them. She saw it in the way the kitchen staff laughed more now, in the way servers helped each other instead of competing for the best tables, in the way everyone seemed to take pride in their work. One evening, about a month after Robert took over, Sarah was finishing her shift when she saw a familiar sight. A woman walked in, her clothes threadbare, her face lined with exhaustion and worry. She had a young boy with her, maybe 6 or 7 years old, who clung to her hand and looked around with wide, uncertain eyes. The woman approached the host stand hesitantly, as if expecting to be turned away. Sarah was at the host stand, and when the woman reached her, Sarah smiled warmly. "Good evening. Welcome to Riverside Bistro. Table for 2?"
The woman looked surprised by the friendly greeting. "Yes, please, but I do not have much money. I just got paid today, and I wanted to take my son somewhere nice for his birthday. But if you do not have anything cheap on the menu, we can go somewhere else. I do not want to waste your time." Sarah's heart ached. She saw herself in this woman, saw the pride fighting with desperation, saw the desire to give her child something special, even in the middle of struggle. "We have a wonderful menu with lots of options," Sarah said gently. "And it is someone's birthday? Well, that is very special. Let me get you our best table." She led them to a table by the window, where the setting sun painted the water in shades of orange and pink. The little boy's eyes went wide when he saw the view. "Mom, look at the river! It is so pretty!" The woman smiled, her eyes filling with tears. "It really is, sweetheart." Sarah brought the menus and water, and when she returned to take their order, she quietly recommended the items that were most filling and least expensive, without making it obvious. "The chicken parmesan is really popular," she said. "It comes with a big salad and garlic bread, and the pasta special today is really good too, very hearty." The woman ordered the pasta for herself and chicken nuggets for her son, and Sarah could see her mentally calculating the cost. When Sarah brought their food, she made sure the portions were generous. She also brought extra garlic bread and a larger salad than usual. Throughout their meal, Sarah checked on them regularly, refilling water glasses and making sure they had everything they needed. The little boy was adorable, talking excitedly about his birthday and what he wanted to be when he grew up. His mother listened with such love and attention, clearly treasuring this moment with her son. When they finished and asked for the check, Sarah brought it over, but she had already paid it herself. It was not much, maybe $35, but it was worth it to see the relief and gratitude on the woman's face. "I am sorry, but there must be a mistake," the woman said, looking at the check. "This says 0. Sarah smiled. "No mistake. Someone already took care of it. Happy birthday to your son." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Who? Why would someone do that?" "Because everyone deserves to celebrate special moments," Sarah said softly. "Because kindness matters. Enjoy the rest of your evening." The woman stood up and hugged Sarah tightly, whispering thank you over and over. The little boy hugged her too, his small arms wrapping around her waist. They left, and Sarah cleared their table, feeling a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the small tip they had managed to leave. She turned and found Robert standing nearby, watching her with a smile. She flushed, wondering if she had overstepped, if paying for a customer's meal was against policy. But Robert just nodded approvingly. "That was well done," he said, quietly, approaching her. Sarah shook her head. "It was the least I could do. They needed help. And I remembered what you said about everyone deserving dignity and respect. They deserve to have a nice birthday dinner without worrying about money." Robert walked over to stand beside her, both of them looking out the window at the river. The sun was setting now, the sky a brilliant display of colors. "Do you remember what I told you the day we met in my office about understanding why you did what you did?" Sarah nodded. "I have been thinking about it a lot. And what have you learned?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. This was something she had spent many sleepless nights contemplating, trying to understand the person she had been and the person she wanted to become. "I think I was angry," she said, finally. "Not at you specifically, not at that old man who walked in that morning. I was angry at life, at how hard everything was, at how much I had to carry. My mom got sick, and suddenly I was responsible for everything. I had to give up school, give up my dreams, work 60 hours a week just to keep us afloat. And no one seemed to care. Customers treated me like I was invisible, or worse, like I was beneath them. Marcus treated all of us like we were replaceable, and I felt so powerless, so trapped." She paused, swallowing hard. "And I think when you walked in, I saw someone I could finally have power over. Someone I could judge and dismiss the way I felt judged and dismissed every day. It was not right, but I think that is where it came from. I took all that anger and pain and frustration and I aimed it at someone who I thought I could hurt without consequences. Someone I saw as beneath me, even though I was barely holding on myself." Robert listened intently, his expression compassionate. "That takes a lot of courage to admit. I am not proud of it," Sarah said, "but I understand it now, and I am trying to do better. Every day I try to remember that everyone is fighting a battle I know nothing about. That woman who just left, I was her 3 years ago. Struggling, exhausted, just trying to give my family something good. And if someone had shown me kindness like that, it would have meant the world. So I try to be the person I needed back then." Robert put a hand on her shoulder, and when she looked at him, his eyes were shining with unshed tears. "That is all any of us can do, Sarah. Try to be better. Try to be kinder. Try to remember that we are all connected, that our actions ripple out in ways we cannot always see. You are doing well. You are doing so well. I am proud of you." Those simple words, spoken with such sincerity, nearly undid her. She blinked back tears and smiled at him. "Thank you for everything, for seeing something in me worth saving, for giving me a second chance when I did not deserve it." Robert smiled back, squeezing her shoulder gently. "You always deserved it, Sarah. You just needed someone to remind you of that. We all lose our way sometimes. We all need someone to help us find our path again." As the weeks turned into months, the reputation of Riverside Bistro grew. Word spread about the kind owner who worked alongside his staff, about the warm atmosphere, about the feeling that you were not just a customer but a valued guest. Business increased steadily, not because of advertising or gimmicks, but because people wanted to be in a place that made them feel good, that reminded them of the better parts of humanity. The staff morale improved dramatically. People who had been going through the motions, just collecting a paycheck, began to take pride in their work. They started going above and beyond, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. They wanted to be part of something that mattered, something that made a difference. Mike, the young server who had always been good at his job, became exceptional. He started remembering regular customers' orders, their preferences, details about their lives. He made people feel seen and valued. Jenny became more confident, offering suggestions to customers and handling difficult situations with grace. Even the kitchen staff, who customers never saw, took pride in their work, plating dishes beautifully and ensuring every meal was perfect. Sarah's own life improved too. With the raise Robert had given her and the new health insurance, she was able to finally catch up on her bills. Her mother's health stabilized, her medication was covered, and she could see her doctor regularly without the family having to choose between medical care and other necessities. Her brother Tommy went on his school trip, and Sarah was able to afford it without the crushing anxiety she had felt before. He came back full of stories about the mountains and the campfires and the friends he had made, and seeing his happiness made everything worthwhile. Sarah even started taking an evening class at the community college, just one class to start, thinking that maybe, just maybe, she could finish her degree someday. It was a class in child psychology, something that interested her and related to her old dream of becoming a teacher. For the first time in years, she felt like she had a future that extended beyond just surviving each day. But more than the financial improvements, more than the practical benefits, Sarah felt like she had found herself again. The bitter, exhausted person she had become was slowly being replaced by someone softer, someone kinder, someone who believed in the goodness of people again. She smiled more, she laughed more, she looked forward to going to work instead of dreading it. One evening, about 6 months after Robert took over, something happened that would change everything again. Robert called a staff meeting at the end of the night shift. Everyone gathered in the dining room, tired from a busy evening, but curious about what the meeting was about. Robert stood before them, and Sarah noticed immediately that he looked older and more tired than usual. There was something in his expression that worried her, a weariness that went beyond simple physical exhaustion. Robert cleared his throat and smiled at them all, but the smile did not quite reach his eyes. "I wanted to gather you all here to share some news," he said. "First, I want to thank you, all of you. When I bought this place, I hoped to create something special, a place that embodied the values I hold dear. But I could not have done that without your help, your hard work, and your willingness to embrace a different way of doing things. You have exceeded every expectation I had." People glanced at each other, smiling, pleased by the praise, but also sensing that something more was coming. Robert continued, "I also want to tell you that I am stepping back from the day-to-day operations. I am old, and I am tired, and it is time for me to let someone younger take the reins." A murmur of surprise and concern rippled through the group. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Was he selling the restaurant again? Was everything going to change? Had they only had this brief period of happiness before returning to how things were before? Robert held up a hand, quieting them. "Please, let me finish. I am not selling. This place will remain exactly as it is. But I am handing over the management to someone I trust completely, someone who understands what we are trying to do here and who will continue to uphold these values." The room was silent, everyone wondering who it could be. Marcus had left 2 months ago to pursue other opportunities, something that had been a relief to everyone. Robert turned and looked directly at Sarah. "I am promoting Sarah Mitchell to general manager." For a moment, Sarah thought she had misheard. The room was silent, everyone turning to look at her. She stood frozen, her mouth open, unable to process what was happening. This could not be real. This could not be happening to her. Robert walked over to her, his eyes twinkling with amusement at her shock, but also with pride and certainty. "Sarah, you have shown more growth and dedication in these past few months than most people show in a lifetime. You have become a leader here, whether you realize it or not. The staff respect you, the customers love you, and I trust you completely. Will you accept?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears for what felt like the 100th time since Robert had walked into her life. But these were tears of joy, of disbelief, of overwhelming gratitude. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, of course. I do not know what to say. I do not know if I can do this." Robert smiled warmly. "You can, and you will. I have seen you grow from someone who was lost and hurting into someone who leads with compassion and strength. You understand what this place is about because you lived it. You experienced both sides, both the cruelty and the grace. That makes you the perfect person to carry this forward." He continued, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. "Say you will continue to make this place a home for everyone who walks through that door. Say you will remember that kindness matters, that everyone deserves dignity and respect. Say you will pass on the lessons you have learned to others, so that this place can be a light in the darkness for years to come. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. I promise I will honor what you have built here. I will take care of this place and these people the way you took care of me. The staff erupted in applause, genuine and enthusiastic. Jenny was crying too, and so was Mike, and several others. They crowded around Sarah, hugging her, congratulating her, and she felt overwhelmed by the love and support. These people who had been just co-workers had become a family, and she was being entrusted with their well-being. Later that evening, after the restaurant had closed and the staff had gone home, Sarah sat alone at one of the tables, looking around at the empty dining room. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the bitter, exhausted waitress who had turned away an old man to the manager of a thriving restaurant. She thought about Robert and his incredible grace, his willingness to see past her worst moment and believe in her potential for growth. She heard footsteps and looked up to see Robert walking toward her, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He set one in front of her and sat down with the other. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their coffee and watching the last light fade from the sky outside. The river flowed past the windows, constant and peaceful. Finally, Sarah spoke. I still think about that day sometimes, about what I did, about the person I was. Robert nodded. That is good. We should remember our mistakes, not to torture ourselves, but to remind us of how far we have come and to keep us humble. Do you ever regret giving me a second chance? Do you ever wonder if you made the wrong choice? Robert looked at her, his eyes warm and certain. Not for 1 second. You are proof that people can change, Sarah. You are proof that grace and mercy are not wasted, that kindness can transform lives. You are going to do wonderful things here, and you are going to help other people the way I tried to help you. That is how it works. We receive grace, and then we extend it to others. It is a chain that goes on and on, making the world a little bit better, one person at a time. Sarah smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace settle over her. I will do my best, I promise. I know you will, Robert said, and that is all anyone can ask. They sat there together as the night deepened, the restaurant quiet and peaceful around them. Outside, the river flowed on as it always had, reflecting the lights of the city, constant and enduring. Inside, 2 people who had found each other at just the right moment shared a quiet moment of understanding and hope. The lesson that had begun with a moment of cruelty had become a story of redemption and grace. Sarah had learned that kindness costs nothing, but its absence can cost everything. She had learned that everyone deserves dignity and respect, regardless of how they look or what they can afford. She had learned that second chances are precious gifts, and that the greatest thing we can do is extend that same grace to others. As Robert stood to leave, he paused and looked back at her one more time. You know, Sarah, that day when you turned me away, I was not angry. I was sad. Sad because I saw someone who had forgotten how to see the humanity in others. But I also saw potential. I saw someone who had the capacity for great compassion, if only they could remember it. I am glad I was right. Sarah stood and walked over to him, and without thinking, she hugged him. Robert hugged her back, patting her shoulder gently. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for seeing something in me that I had forgotten was there." "It was always there," Robert said softly. "You just needed a reminder. You just needed someone to believe in you." He left, and Sarah turned off the lights, locked the doors, and walked out into the cool night air. As she drove home, she thought about all the people she would encounter in her new role, all the opportunities she would have to make a difference. She thought about the staff she would now lead, about how she could help them grow and thrive the way Robert had helped her. She thought about the customers who would walk through those doors, some confident and well-dressed, others hesitant and worn down by life. And she promised herself that every single one of them would be welcomed, would be seen, would be treated with the dignity and respect that every human being deserves. The story of the waitress who laughed at a poor old man could have ended badly. It could have been a story about cruelty rewarded, about someone losing everything because of one mistake. But instead, it became a story about grace and redemption, about second chances and the transformative power of kindness. Sarah carried that story with her every day as she walked into Riverside Bistro, ready to serve not just food, but also hope, not just meals, but also dignity. She carried it in her heart, a reminder of who she had been and who she had become. And she shared that story, in words and in actions, with everyone she met. Because in the end, the greatest lesson Robert taught her was this: we are all capable of both cruelty and kindness. We all have moments when we fail to see the humanity in others. But we also all have the capacity to change, to grow, to become better. And when we are shown grace in our worst moments, we have a responsibility to extend that same grace to others. The restaurant thrived under Sarah's management. Years passed, and the story of what happened there became part of the local legend, a reminder to everyone who heard it about the importance of treating others with kindness and respect. Robert eventually passed away peacefully in his sleep 5 years later, surrounded by the people he had touched. And Sarah spoke at his funeral about the old man in worn clothes who had changed her life forever. She talked about grace and second chances, about how one person's kindness can create ripples that spread far beyond what they could ever imagine. She talked about how Robert had not just changed her life, but had changed the lives of everyone who worked at Riverside Bistro, and through them, the lives of countless customers who walked through those doors and felt welcomed and valued. She continued his legacy, running Riverside Bistro with the same values he had instilled. She hired people who were struggling, gave them chances when others would not, and taught them the same lessons Robert had taught her. She created a place where everyone truly was welcome, where judgments were left at the door, and where kindness was the currency that mattered most. She hired a young single mother who needed flexible hours and taught her that she could be a great mother and a great employee. She hired a formerly incarcerated man who could not get a job anywhere else and gave him the chance to prove himself. She hired a teenager who was struggling in school and helped him find confidence and purpose. Each person she helped became part of the chain of grace that Robert had started. And sometimes, when the restaurant was quiet and the last customers had left, Sarah would sit at the same table where she had sat with Robert that night so many years ago. She would remember the scared, bitter young woman she had been, and she would feel grateful for the journey that had brought her here. She would think about the old man who could have destroyed her, but chose to redeem her instead. And she would renew her commitment to live up to the faith he had placed in her, to be a light in the darkness, to remember always that kindness costs nothing, but its absence can cost everything. That was the lesson. That was the story. And that was the legacy that lived on, long after Robert was gone, in the hearts of everyone who walked through the doors of Riverside Bistro and felt, perhaps for the first time in a long time, that they truly belonged, that they truly mattered, that they were truly seen and valued as the human beings they were.